Now let's take a look at how to refactor our tests to use helpers and make them more concise and consistent. We're going to return to our getById endpoint test that we saw earlier. In it you can see that we've taken the arrange step and ensured that everything there is being done inside the Web API application. So we can't really simplify the arrange any more than we already have. We're also pulling in the seed data into a local property so that we have access to it in any of our tests that need to use it. Now you can see the bulk of the one and only test that is here is in the act step. And the act step is essentially doing all the work of going and making the call, getting back the response, converting it from a string into a type, and then having that result, which in this case is going to be an author DTO, ready for us to perform assertions on. So the first thing that we can do is we can refactor that large block of code using Visual Studio's built-in refactoring tools, or of course we could just do it by hand. Once we extract a method, we need to just give it a new name. Get and deserialize should work. Also, I would prefer to pass the route to this method so that I can use it for other things. So I'm going to refactor it slightly more. Now at this point it looks like we're in good shape. Let's go ahead and run the test again. And we can see that it still passes. Next, let's create another test for this same endpoint. We want to verify that we should get a not found result if we don't pass in an ID that corresponds to our resource. This simple test should do the trick. We can run it to be sure. And again, our tests pass. In my APIs, not found results are very commonly returned, especially from getById methods. And so there tends to be a lot of repetition in this type of test. So even though it's only a couple of lines of code between the getting of the result and the assertion that it's not found, I've found that it can be useful to use a helper for this as well. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and again refactor these 2 lines of code. And again, I'm going to pass in the route. Running our tests one more time, we see that they succeed. Now, this get and deserialize and get and assert not found, these are very reusable. So right now they're sitting inside of a single test class as private helper methods, and that's usually where I will start with such things. But as I find that they can be used more broadly, I will start to repackage these up and put them into the test project where they're public and accessible by all tests, or even package them up as a NuGet package and make them available for any client or even anybody that wants to use them on NuGet.org. And so that's what I've done already. And I'm going to go ahead and use some of my extension methods instead of the helper methods that we're using right here. So I'm going to just copy this first test that we refactored. Now, instead of using our helper method, I'm going to use an extension method on client that's brought in by my NuGet package. Now we can just run this test, and you see it works. We can do the same thing for the assert not found. And if we run this test, we see that it also passes. You can install our Dallas.http client test extensions using NuGet, and you'll find documentation on its GitHub repo if you think that these might be helpful for you. That wraps up this final module and the course. In this module, we learned how to set up ASP.NET Core Web API integration tests using Web Application Factory. We saw how to work with seed data and some best practices to avoid problems caused by multiple tests manipulating data at the same time. And finally, we looked at some techniques we can use to keep our individual tests small and focused with minimal duplicate code. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this course, and I thank you very much for your time. I look forward to hearing your comments in the discussion tab or on social media, where you'll find me as @Ardalis. Now, go do awesome stuff.